What we're going to go over in this video is how to write the equation of a line. And the information that you're going to be given is the graph of the line. Every time somebody asks you to write the equation of a line, you're going to start off with y is equal to. Y is equal to every single time. And the two pieces of information that you need is you need the slope, which is going to go in this spot right here, and then you need the y-intercept. So you need to look at the picture, count the blocks like we've gone over in previous videos, figure out what the slope is by counting the blocks, put it right there in that spot. Then you look and see what the y-intercept is. The y-intercept is where that line crosses the y-axis. Once you have those two pieces of information, you just put them in these two spots right here, and you've got the equation of the line. Remember, always start off with y is equal to. Then you figure out what the slope is. You count the blocks, you figure out what the slope is, then you write the x beside it. Then here on the end, you figure out where that line crosses the y-axis, and you put that number there. If that number is a negative, then this is going to be negative whatever the number is. If it's positive, then it's going to be positive whatever the number is. So let's look at our first example. Example number 1. It is asking me to look at this graph and write the equation of a line in slope-intercept form. To write the equation of this line in slope-intercept form, the very first thing I'm going to write down is y is equal to every single time. I need to now find the slope. The slope goes in this spot right here. So I'm looking at this line like I did on the previous ones, and I need to find 2 points. This is a point right here, and this is a point right here. There's my 2 points. I'm going to count blocks in between those 2 points. I go up and down first. That goes in the top of my fraction. How many I count across goes in the bottom of the fraction. So I'm going to count up 1 and over 1, 2, 3. That's my slope. I put an x beside it. Right here on the end is I need to figure out the y-intercept, where this line runs into the y-axis. Well, it runs into it at -4. That's the point that it runs into the y-axis. I just wrote the equation of this line right here. Again, I start off by writing y is equal to. I figure out what the slope is. That's what I did. I wrote it down right there. I put an x beside the slope, and then I figure out what the y-intercept is, where this line runs into the y-axis, and it runs into it at -4. Example number 2. Example number 2, it says, what is the equation of a line in slope-intercept form? So they want me to write an equation for this line. I'm going to start off with y is equal to. The first thing I need to figure out is what's the slope of this line right here. That means I need to find 2 points on this line. So this is a point right here. Then I'm going to look, and there's another point right there on this line. I'm going to use these 2 points, count the blocks, and figure out what the slope is. Once I figure out what the slope is, it's going to go in this spot right here. So I'm going to go ahead and make a division bar. I want to count up and down first. That goes in the top of my fraction. 1, 2, 3. 3 goes in the top of my fraction. Looking back at my picture, I need to go over 1, 2. 2 goes in the bottom. Another thing you need to do is you look at these graphs, and it can tell you whether or not this is going to be a positive or negative slope. Again, we read things going left to right, moving left to right. As soon as I hit that line, I start moving down. This is going to be -3/2. I put an x beside the slope. The next thing I need to figure out is what the y-intercept is. It goes right here. Where does this line run into the y-axis? Well, it runs into it at +1. So I'm going to put +1 right there. Always start these things with y is equal to. You figure out what the slope is by counting the blocks. You look and see if it is a positive slope. Positive slope would go up like this. This one's a negative slope. That's the reason I put a negative sign right there. Put the x beside it, Then I figure out where this line runs into the y-axis. It runs into the y-axis at +1. That's the reason I put a +1 down here on the end. This right here is the equation for this line. Example number 3. They want me to write an equation of this line in slope-intercept form. That means I'm going to start off with y is equal to. Always start off with y is equal to. The first thing I need to figure out is what the slope is. To figure out the slope, I need to find 2 points on this line. So I'm going to use this point right here, and I'm going to move down and try and find another point. Looks like there's another point right here. Those are the 2 points I'm going to use to figure out what the slope is. Slope is usually a fraction, so I'm going to write my division bar, and I'm going to start counting. How many I count up and down goes in the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 goes in the top. How many I go across goes in the bottom. Well, I only had to go across 1. Next thing, I need to see whether or not this number, the slope, is going to be positive or negative. Based on this line right here, this line is going down. That's going to be a negative. I'm going to put an X beside it. And then here on the end, I need to figure out where this line crosses the y-axis. Well, let's look. It's crossing the y-axis right here. Let me count up to that. 1, 2, 3. +3 goes on the end. There's only one other thing I need to do about this. They're not going to write this slope as a fraction, because you can actually take 7 and divide it by 1. So what they're going to write is y is equal to -7x plus 3. Much simpler way of writing it than this right here. If I was actually going to use the slope, I need to write it as a fraction. But I can take -7 and divide it by 1 and get a whole number. So if there's whole numbers, end up getting a whole number once you divide, then you need to write it as a whole number. This is the equation of this line right here. Start off with y is equal to, counted the blocks to figure out what the slope is, put it right there, put an X beside it, and then I figured out what the y-intercept is, where this line crosses the y-axis, which is right there at +3. Example number 4. Example number 4, they want us to write the equation of this line in slope-intercept form. That means starting off with y is equal to. And I'm going to go ahead and make a division bar because this is where my slope is going to be. To figure out the slope, I need to find some points and start counting. There's a point right here, and there's a point right here. That means I'm going to go up 1, that goes in the top, over 1, that goes in the bottom. This line is going up. That means this is going to be positive slope. I put an X beside the slope, and then here on the end I put the y-intercept. What's the y-intercept? -6. This is another situation where these numbers, you can actually divide them and you get a whole number. 1 divided by 1 is 1. So y is equal to 1x minus 6. Another thing they probably want you to do is make this simpler, make it easier to write. It's kind of understood that there's a 1 in front of this x, so most math teachers are going to write it y is equal to x minus 6, so you don't have that extra 1 there. Another reason they don't want you to write this 1 here is because a lot of times this may get confused as being an L or an I or something like that. It's understood that there's a 1 in front of that x, so this is a much simpler and better way of writing this. To write the equation of a line, start off with y is equal to, figure out what the slope is, put that in front of the x, and then here on the end you put the y-intercept, where this line crosses the y-axis. Example number 5. Example number 5 looks like this. They say write an equation for this line right here in slope-intercept form. Guess what we're going to start off with? Y is equal to. Right here I need to figure out what the slope is, so I need to find 2 points on this line. This right here is a point on this line. This right here is another point that's on this line. I need to count and figure out what the slope is. Slope is usually a fraction. I'm going to make a division bar. How many I go up and down goes in the top, so I'm going to go up 1, over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This line is going up. that's going to be positive slope. I put an X beside the slope, and then here on the end I figure out the y-intercept. That's where this line crosses the y-axis. Here's the y-axis, and where does that line run into the y-axis at? At positive 4.